So last episode, we diagnosed the problem that we're now talking about. Or last episode, we diagnosed the problem, and now we're talking about the solution: multiplication. So if multiplication is the strategy, that's going to involve first a cultural shift. We have to move from gathering to sending, from seeding to sowing. And for a long time, the scorecard has been how many people can we gather in one place. But if we're going to become a multiplying movement, the question becomes how many people can we equip and then send? Because healthy things don't just grow, they reproduce. The second thing is disciple making changes. Multiplication doesn't start with planting churches, it starts with making disciples. And it's not just disciples, but disciples who know how to make disciples. Because programs don't multiply, events don't multiply, people multiply. So Jesus doesn't build a system, he invested in people. He walked with them, he taught them, and he sent them, and then expected them to do the same. And the third thing is leadership development has to change. You cannot have multiplication without leadership development. At some point, every church hits a ceiling, not because of space, but because of leadership capacity. If leaders don't release the responsibility, then they will become the bottleneck. Multiplying churches are constantly asking, who can I invest in? Who can I train? Who can I send? Not just how can I do more, but who else can do this? And so, guys, what's the difference between training leaders and just filling positions?
I think the difference comes down to short-term versus long-term thinking. Filling positions is about getting someone just to fill in a role to keep the thing going. Like we need a volunteer, who's available, and you plug that person in. Mm-hmm. But training a leader is slower. You walk with someone, you develop them over time. It could look like letting someone lead a small group, and even if they're not perfect yet, giving them the responsibility and coaching them instead of just doing it yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Ryan. I mean, we're told to train because at the end of the day, whether I'm here, you're there, Ryan's there, it must continue.
Right.
But if we aren't training new leaders up in the congregation, then what are we doing? Because it needs to not be solely focused on one individual, but as a whole.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. So this is kind of something we're talking about in our leadership board at the moment, and we're talking about in the Methodist Church, lay leadership is set up to where you serve for 3 years. There's 3 classes, and you serve 3 years. And what I've kind of noticed, and me and another pastor were talking about, was you come onto the board your first year, and it's kind of you're just kind of catching up, right? You're learning, okay, how does this structure work? What are your responsibilities? And you're kind of building some familiarity. But during that time, you don't feel really confident to maybe voice a concern or opinion at the moment, or even have the confidence of making absolute decisions. And then by the second year, you've kind of grown a bit more comfortable. By the third year, right, you're comfortable, you're effective, but at the end of that year, you're done. And then you start with a whole new class. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is because I think this is such a perfect example, because we just fill that position with a new class. Maybe they know it, maybe they don't know it. And how can we intentionally develop those leaders and recognize that just because you step off of the board doesn't mean you've stopped being a leader. If anything, the whole reason you were recommended to serve on the board was because you were seen as a leader. And so, how do we overlap that to where, um, we're being mindful of developing leaders um, as a way to guarantee the success of the board, which ultimately seeks to guarantee the success of the congregation. And so that it's not about one person or a handful of people. It becomes about the whole congregation. How can we develop the whole congregation to be the leaders that we need them to be? And so it's no longer about just filling position, but could you imagine having multiple people who could fill that role? That you never have to fear having a vacancy or people who are unwilling to step up or who are afraid to make decisions or whatever. Instead, you would have trained leaders who are willing and wanting to serve. And so, as we kind of continue, some other things, the fourth thing that needs to happen is exponential impact. We need to begin thinking beyond just one location. So, when we focus on addition, we're only asking, how do we grow this church? While multiplication asks, how do we reach our city? How do we reach our region? How do we reach this generation? Because one church, no matter how healthy, has limits, but a multiplying movement has exponential potential, right? The fact is one church in one location is not going to be able to reach every single person in a community or in a region. We could try, but usually that would require a whole new structure. But one disciple making one disciple who makes another disciple suddenly is no longer just adding, but it begins to multiply. And then fifthly, we need to overcome internal resistance. And so we have to let go for the kingdom of heaven. So now let me be honest. This is where it gets hard because multiplication requires us not to let go of things we naturally want to hold on to. First, control. Control looks like needing to approve every decision, being the primary voice in every room, or feeling like nothing can function without you. We try to make it sound spiritual by saying, well, I just want to make sure it's done right. But underneath, that is fear speaking. Because what we're also saying is, what if they mess up? What if it doesn't meet the standards? You can't have control, or you can have control, or you can have multiplication, but you can't have both. And so part of multiplying is we have to be willing to let go of control, recognizing that we really aren't the ones in control. It's God who's in control. Another one is our comfort. Comfort shows up in subtle ways. Familiar routines, predictable services, knowing everyone's name, having things feel manageable and personal, avoiding tension that comes with growth. And again, it's not all bad, it's just incomplete because growth brings new people, new problems, and new dynamics. Suddenly, church doesn't feel as comfortable as it used to be. But here's the tension: comfort often competes with mission. What feels comfortable to insiders may feel inaccessible to outsiders. And so, guys, have you ever seen a church choose comfort over mission without ever realizing it?
I'm gonna take this one. So this is, I mean, we've been talking about this a lot, right?
Yeah.
Ryan, I mean, even you, Lupe, we've been talking about this a lot. I think a lot of churches they get to a certain plateau and they look inward to themselves. We do this for our congregation. We do this for our people. and we lose that fact that even service on a Sunday morning is a mission. The mission is to preach the word of God to all to hear. Whether that means you've been coming here for 50 years or this is your first Sunday. And we're so comfortable with we always have the choir here and the pastor lights these candles every week and that's the way, or this is my seat. And we get just comfortable in that. And we don't think of anything about anything else. And we lose track of what's going on outside. And we talk about one church too. We're not called we're Methodists, but it doesn't mean that our non-denominational brother, our sister church can't help us out. We're trying to reach to everyone.
Right.
We can openly communicate there and we're growing the kingdom of God. Just because they're not coming to our physical building doesn't mean we didn't grow the kingdom.
Yeah. You got anything to add to that, Ryan?
Not really. That sums it up really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is kind of this is kind of a big thing because, at least for me, because what I see as a pastor, especially walking into a new church, is sometimes our congregations can get to a point where they get comfortable with the routine.
Mm.
And it's the mentality is for people to come to them.
Yeah.
Rather than for us as the church to go out on mission and to bring them. And so sometimes we choose comfort over mission in a variety of ways, sometimes it's the comfort of, not putting ourselves out there to invite people to church.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's sacrificing, maybe our lunch plans with people that we go with every single Sunday. and there's those groups and that's not a bad thing. That's great. But if it's exclusive and closed off to new people, well then we're overlooking the mission. And instead, we should use those groups and those opportunities to invite new people as a way to bring them in the fold of the family of God. I think sometimes it's when we default to, just the way things have always been, without being willing to consider setting something up differently, doing things differently, or even letting go of things. One thing that I was having a conversation with some guys earlier, is one of the struggles that we're having is, we have a parlor, and they recently redid the flooring, and it's different. It's different than what it used to look like, and they're still not done with it. They're still trying to determine kind of some of the more permanent decorations in there and kind of the setup, but they can't really come to a decision, and it's because and this is what I've been told, that there are some who are still stuck on it looking like a parlor, and it being treated like a parlor, without taking into consideration what is our present context and what is it that we hope that it might become, with a mission-oriented goal. And so, sometimes I think our comfort keeps us indecisive and it keeps things as they always are. And it's always interesting because we we will all admit that we want things to grow, and regardless of how we, I think, understand that, right? Grow more healthy, or grow more numerically, or grow through multiplication. Many times comfort stands in the way of that, because it keeps us locked in fear of kind of going in a direction that's unknown and uncertain for us. But I think, as the church and as Christians, we need to learn to experiment a little. The fact is that some things are going to work, some things aren't. And we're not asked to, know it all and to have it all figured out before we take a leap of faith. No, we're just called to take a leap of faith and trust that God is going to take care of it. But as we kind of continue on, some other things that stand as internal resistance are resources. Right, resources are very practical too. Right, this includes our finances, our time, our energy, and our facilities, and these are real concerns. But here, here is the kingdom tension. Multiplication often requires giving away what feels essential, right? Investing money in new works instead of internal upgrades, releasing time to disciple others instead of just maintaining programs, sharing space instead of protecting it. The kingdom of heaven doesn't expand through accumulation, it expands through release. And then the last internal resistance we need to overcome are people, which might be the hardest resistance to overcome, because they aren't just people. They are your most faithful volunteers. They are your strongest leaders, your closest relationships. And when multiplication is real, those are often the very people God calls to go, to lead something new, to start something new, to reach people you can't. And it can feel like loss. Who's going to lead this ministry now? What will happen to what we've built? We just got healthy. Why would we send them away? But again, we need to shift our mindset, because sending isn't losing, it's reproducing. A church that never sins eventually stops growing, but a church that sends becomes a movement, not just a location. So when we step back and look at multiplication, it isn't just about doing more. It's about becoming something different. A church that doesn't just gather people, but equips, sends, and reproduces disciples. And maybe the real question for all of us is this: are we building something that depends on us, or something that continues beyond us? Because based on how we answer that question might determine whether or not we truly believe multiplication is the strategy. And so that's all we have for you all this week. Catch us on our next episode.